Israel is expanding its ground operations in Gaza. This as Benjamin Netanyahu in the last couple of hours has declared that his country will not agree to a ceasefire. The Israel Defence Force has renewed its calls for civilians to move from the north to the south as it targets Hamas militants, it says, is hiding underneath the Gaza city in a complex network of tunnels. Joining me live now is Israel's Defence Force spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, thanks so much for your time as always. What can you tell us about the last 24 hours and the targets Israel has hit?
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me. We are striking inside the Gaza Strip. We are operating on the ground with ground troops, engaging with the enemy and striking the enemy wherever it is in those areas. A short moment of joy for Israel. One of our 238 hostages was indeed freed in a joint rescue operation performed by different Israeli special forces, IDF and ISA, our internal security agency, based on dedicated intelligence and made or facilitated by the fact that we have ground troops in Gaza operating. At the time, we are operating using all of the assets that we have available against Hamas with good results, and of course are very committed to returning all of our 238 hostages and to dismantle Hamas.
In the IDF's view, is a ground forces the only hope of returning these 238 hostages? Does that mean that you have given up negotiating with Hamas to get them back?
So we're not negotiating with Hamas. There are intermediaries in the picture, but of course not. We will. I don't think that the state of Israel will ever say no to any possibility of Israeli hostages being returned, whether it is direct, indirect, by force, or through diplomacy. In whatever way, it's great, and the ultimate aim is to have Israelis back home with their loved ones, possibly as safe and sound and as quickly as possible. So nothing would be ruled out by Israel.
I note there's been several warnings from Israel, particularly for people to move from the north to the south, also at Al-Shifa Hospital, where there seems to be thousands of civilians as well as sick people taking shelter there. Hamas, as is true to form, does usually set up headquarters in places like hospitals, and I don't think Al-Shifa would be any different. But what it does is force Israel to make a choice whether to strike those targets or not. How do you weigh that up at this point?
Yeah, the first thing that we have done is first and foremost to show that and expose it and to say it on record that we have information, intelligence that is very clear that Hamas uses Shifa and other sensitive that would be protected locations like hospitals, mosques, schools, and UN facilities. They use that for military purposes in a direct violation of the laws of armed conflict. So the first thing is to do is to say and be clear about it. We don't want to target anybody. We don't want civilians to be killed, and we definitely don't want a hospital to be affected by fighting. We know that there are people there who need medical care. What we do want to achieve is for Hamas to understand that they are endangering civilians by being there, and for them to make the right choice. If they really do care about Palestinian civilians and about the hospital, they should vacate their underground facilities there. They should tell all of their operatives to stay clear of Shifa and any other hospital and sensitive humanitarian location, and fight in the streets, fight from their tunnels, but not using sensitive humanitarian locations.
And if they don't, because they're likely not to?
If they don't, of course, we will be forced to defend ourselves and we will have to go where the enemy is. But I can assure you one thing, whatever we do, we will apply force with distinction, we will apply force with proportionality, and we will try to the greatest extent possible not to harm civilians. We understand the complexity. I think we have much more compassion for Gazan civilians than Hamas does, which I think is deplorable. And at the end of the day, Hamas will be defeated and there will be security, stability, and peace in the south.
In your view, not in your view, but in the IDF's view and Benjamin Netanyahu's view, when you say Hamas is defeated and Israel wins, do you have a clear picture, Jonathan, of what that looks like?
Well, on the we have to distinguish between the war cabinet and the politically elected echelon and the military. What we've been told to do is to dismantle Hamas, its military capabilities and its administrative capabilities. And I'm sure that Israel is thinking about how to stabilize the situation after the fighting is done. We in the IDF aren't really looking at that now. Our primary focus is, we're fighting in Gaza. We're defending ourselves against Hezbollah aggression and attacks in the north. We are thwarting attacks and incoming missiles from the south. And we're looking at a very dynamic regional picture. So there's a lot going on. What we're focusing on now for this stage is to dismantle Hamas and to make sure that we don't get sidetracked in any of the other areas of operations where there are other Iranian factions.
One of the enduring horrors of this war will be the picture that many of us saw of one of those young music festival goers being kidnapped and paraded in the back of a ute through the streets of Gaza. We understand now, and it has been reported, that Shani Louk, her body has been found and there has been DNA testing. Is there anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, the sad story, and the family has confirmed that they have gotten the notice, is that she is confirmed dead. She is not alive. Unfortunately, she is not in Israel being held. But it is our understanding that that is the situation, and the family has been notified. Of course, this, extremely sad and brutal, and the images, as you said, they are etched in many people's memory. The brutality, the sheer joy of Palestinian men parading a half-naked woman at the back of a truck, joyous at their victory. They interpret this as their victory. Extremely shameful, but I think it shows the world exactly whom and what we are fighting. And as every day goes by, we hear more stories of survivors and victims and people that were wounded, of the atrocities that they faced on the 7th of October. It really gives us focus into understanding what we're facing and how important it is that we win and eradicate Hamas and create a better future for ourselves, but also for Gaza.
And of the 238 hostages, how do you have intelligence, and can you confirm that all of them are still alive? Or what's your situation? What's the view on that right now?
Yeah, we're collecting a lot of intelligence. We have a special task force, a national level task force that is really vacuuming up all the available intelligence, open source, clandestine, etc. We know that some were taken dead. For instance, like the young lady Shani, that we just spoke about. We also know of military personnel that were taken dead, but we do not know the current situation of how they're being held and how they're being, what their condition is in Hamas captivity. They are the responsibility of Hamas, and I think that the rescue operation of Private Ori Megidish, she is now home safe with her family, is a testimony to the efforts, the quality of the intelligence that we're able to generate, and most importantly, the resolve of getting everybody home.
And Jonathan, just quickly, finally, the fact that that private was rescued by Israel, but only one hostage. Does that tell us that Hamas is holding most of these hostages separately, making your job all the more difficult?
I think that Hamas looks at our hostages as a critical and most valuable asset, and they are working accordingly and taking precautionary measures. We understand that, and we will find ways to overcome it, whether it will be by kinetic activity or other types of activity.
Jonathan Conricus, thanks so much for your time live there in Tel Aviv.